This is a dramatization of a part of an early manuscript of Karl Marx's entitled Human Requirements and Division of Labor Under the Rule of Private Property, written circa 1844. This text is meant to align with the Marx-Engels Reader pages 93 through 98 but is sourced from Marxists.org. Note that there will be some differences in translation and grammar, and so this reading will not sync directly to the reader's version. Herein, Marx describes a key component of capitalism which will go on to be refined by Sigmund Freud and then later employed to great effect by an executive discipline of capitalism called marketing. Bearing in mind that Marx considered political economy a pastiche and political economists as charlatans and pimps, in this text, he describes a kind of three-card Monty forced upon the working class which sublimates their ethics, flattens their humanity to the point of mere subsistence, and then outsources the relief of the resultant logical dissonance to other spheres of repression, such as religion and sophistry. Here is the voice of this channel's creator, the Mad Adam, as Karl Marx.
We have seen what significance, given socialism, the wealth of human needs acquires, and what significance, therefore, both a new mode of production and a new object of production obtain, a new manifestation of the forces of human nature and a new enrichment of human nature. Under private property their significance is reversed. Every person speculates on creating a new need in another, so as to drive him to fresh sacrifice, to place him in a new dependence and to seduce him into a new mode of enjoyment and therefore economic ruin. Each tries to establish over the other an alien power, so as thereby to find satisfaction of his own selfish need. The increase in the quantity of objects is therefore accompanied by an extension of the realm of the alien powers to which man is subjected, and every new product represents a new potentiality of mutual swindling and mutual plundering. Man becomes ever poorer as man. His need for money becomes ever greater if he wants to master the hostile power. The power of his money declines in inverse proportion to the increase in the volume of production. That is, his neediness grows as the power of money increases. The need for money is therefore the true need produced by the economic system, and it is the only need which the latter produces. The quantity of money becomes to an ever greater degree its sole effective quality. Just as it reduces everything to its abstract form, so it reduces itself in the course of its own movement to quantitative being. Excess and intemperance come to be its true norm. Subjectively, this appears partly in the fact that the extension of products and needs becomes a contriving and ever-calculating subservience to inhuman, sophisticated, unnatural, and imaginary appetites. Private property does not know how to change crude need into human need. Its idealism is fantasy, caprice, and whim, and no eunuch flatters his despot more basely or uses more despicable means to stimulate his dulled capacity for pleasure in order to sneak a favor for himself than does the industrial eunuch. The producer, in order to sneak for himself a few pieces of silver, in order to charm the golden birds, out of the pockets of his dearly beloved neighbors in Christ. He puts himself at the service of the other's most depraved fancies, plays the pimp between him and his need, excites in him morbid appetites, lies in wait for each of his weaknesses, all so that he can then demand the cash for this service of love. Every product is a bait with which to seduce away the other's very being. His money, every real and possible need, is a weakness which will lead the fly to the glue pot. General exploitation of communal human nature, just as every imperfection in man is a bond with heaven, an avenue giving the priest access to his heart. Every need is an opportunity to approach one's neighbor under the guise of the utmost amiability, and to say to him, "Dear friend, I give you what you need, but you know the condition, without which there is nothing. You know the ink in which you have to sign yourself over to me. In providing for your pleasure, I fleece you." This estrangement manifests itself in part in that the sophistication of needs and of the means of their satisfaction, on the one side, produces a bestial barbarization, a complete, crude, abstract simplicity of need, on the other, or rather in that it merely reproduces itself in its opposite. Even the need for fresh air ceases to be a need for the worker. Man returns to a cave dwelling, which is now, however, contaminated with the pestilential breath of civilization, in which he continues to occupy only precariously, it being for him an alien habitation which can be withdrawn from him any day, a place from which, if he does not pay, he can be thrown out any day. For this mortuary he has to pay, a dwelling in the light, which Prometheus and Aeschylus designated as one of the greatest boons, by means of which he made the savage into a human being, ceases to exist for the worker. Light, air, etc., the simplest animal cleanliness, ceases to be a need for man. Filth, this stagnation and putrefaction of man, the sewage of civilization, speaking quite literally, comes to be the element of life for him. Utter, unnatural deprivation, putrefied nature, comes to be his life element. None of his senses exist any longer, and each has ceased to function not only in its human fashion, but in an inhuman fashion, so that it does not exist even in an animal fashion. The crudest methods and instruments of human labor are coming back. The treadmill of the Roman slaves, for instance, is the means of production, the means of existence of many English workers. It is not only that man has no human needs, even his animal needs cease to exist. The Irishman no longer knows any need now but the need to eat, and indeed only the need to eat potatoes, and scabby potatoes at that, the worst kind of potatoes. But in each of their industrial towns England and France have already a little Ireland. The savage and the animal have at least the need to hunt, to roam, etc., the need of companionship. The simplification of the machine, of labor, is used to make a worker out of the human being still in the making, the completely immature human being, the child. Whilst the worker has become a neglected child, the machine accommodates itself to the weakness of the human being in order to make the weak human being into a machine. How the multiplication of needs and of the means of their satisfaction breeds the absence of needs and of means is demonstrated by the political economist and by the capitalist. In general, it is always empirical businessmen we are talking about when we refer to political economists, who represent their scientific creed and form of existence as follows. 1. By reducing the worker's need to the barest and most miserable level of physical subsistence, and by reducing his activity to the most abstract mechanical movement. Thus, he says, man has no other need either of activity or of enjoyment. For he declares that this life, too, is human life and existence. 2. By counting the most meager form of life, existence, as the standard, indeed, as the general standard, general because it is applicable to the mass of men. He turns the worker into an insensible being lacking all needs, just as he changes his activity into a pure abstraction from all activity. To him, therefore, every luxury of the worker seems to be reprehensible, and everything that goes beyond the most abstract need, be it in the realm of passive enjoyment, or a manifestation of activity, seems to him a luxury. Political economy, this science of wealth, is therefore simultaneously the science of renunciation, of want, of saving, and it actually reaches the point where it spares man the need of either fresh air or physical exercise. This science of marvelous industry is simultaneously the science of asceticism, and its true ideal is the ascetic but extortionate miser and the ascetic but productive slave. Its moral ideal is the worker who takes part of his wages to the savings bank, and it has even found ready-made a servile art which embodies this pet idea. It has been presented, bathed in sentimentality, on the stage. Thus political economy, despite its worldly and voluptuous appearance, is a true moral science, the most moral of all the sciences. Self-renunciation, the renunciation of life and of all human needs, is its principal thesis. The less you eat, drink, and buy books, the less you go to the theater, the dance hall, the public house, the less you think, love, theorize, sing, paint, fence, etc. The more you save, the greater becomes your treasure which neither moths nor rust will devour, your capital. The less you are, the less you express your own life, the more you have, i.e., the greater is your alienated life, the greater is the store of your estranged being. Everything which the political economist takes from you in life and in humanity, he replaces for you in money and in wealth, and all the things which you cannot do, your money can do. It can eat and drink, go to the dance hall and the theater, it can travel, it can appropriate art, learning, the treasures of the past, political power. All this it can appropriate for you, it can buy all this, it is true endowment. Yet being all this, it wants to do nothing but create itself, by itself, for everything else is after all its servant. And when I have the master, I have the servant, and do not need his servant. All passions and all activity must therefore be submerged in avarice. The worker may only have enough for him to want to live, and may only want to live in order to have that. It is true that a controversy now arises in the field of political economy. The one side, Lauderdale, Malthus, etc., recommends luxury and execrates thrift. The other, say, Ricardo, etc., recommends thrift and execrates luxury. But the former admits that it wants luxury in order to produce labor, i.e., absolute thrift, and the latter admits that it recommends thrift in order to produce wealth, i.e., luxury. The Lauderdale Malthus school has the romantic notion that avarice alone ought not to determine the consumption of the rich, and it contradicts its own laws in advancing extravagance as a direct means of enrichment. Against it, therefore, the other side very earnestly and circumstantially proves that I do not increase but reduce my possessions by being extravagant. The Say Ricardo school is hypocritical in not admitting that it is precisely whim and caprice which determine production. It forgets the refined needs. It forgets that there would be no production without consumption. It forgets that as a result of competition, production can only become more extensive and luxurious. It forgets that, according to its views, a thing's value is determined by use, and that use is determined by fashion. It wishes to see only useful things produced, but it forgets that production of too many useful things produces too large a useless population. Both sides forget that extravagance and thrift, luxury and privation, wealth and poverty are equal, and you must not only stint the gratification of your immediate senses, as by stinting yourself on food, etc. You must also spare yourself all sharing of general interests, all sympathy, all trust, etc. If you want to be economical, if you do not want to be ruined by illusions, you must make everything that is yours saleable, i.e., useful. If I ask the political economist, do I obey economic laws if I extract money by offering my body for sale, by surrendering it to another's lust? The factory workers in France call the prostitution of their wives and daughters the nth working hour, which is literally correct. Or am I not acting in keeping with political economy if I sell my friend to the Moroccans? And the direct sale of men in the form of a trade in conscripts, etc., takes place in all civilized countries. Then the political economist replies to me, "You do not transgress my laws, but see what cousin ethics and cousin religion have to say about it." My political, economic ethics and religion have nothing to reproach you with, but whom am I now to believe, political economy or ethics? The ethics of political economy is acquisition, work, thrift, sobriety, but political economy promises to satisfy my needs. The political economy of ethics is the opulence of a good conscience, of virtue, etc. But how can I live virtuously if I do not live? And how can I have a good conscience if I do not know anything? It stems from the very nature of estrangement that each sphere applies to me a different and opposite yardstick. Ethics one and political economy another. For each is a specific estrangement of man and focuses attention on a particular field of estranged essential activity, and each stands in an estranged relation to the other. Thus M. Michel Chevalier reproaches Ricardo with having ignored ethics. But Ricardo is allowing political economy to speak its own language, and if it does not speak ethically, this is not Ricardo's fault. M. Chevalier takes no account of political economy insofar as he moralizes, but he really and necessarily ignores ethics insofar as he practices political economy. The relationship of political economy to ethics, if it is other than an arbitrary, contingent, and therefore unfounded and unscientific relationship, if it is not being posited for the sake of appearance but is meant to be essential, can only be the relationship of the laws of political economy to ethics. If there is no such connection, or if the contrary is rather the case, can Ricardo help it? Moreover, the opposition between political economy and ethics is only an apparent opposition and just as much no opposition as it is an opposition. All that happens is that political economy expresses moral laws in its own way. Frugality as the principle of political economy is most brilliantly shown in its theory of population. There are too many people. Even the existence of men is a pure luxury, and if the worker is ethical, he will be sparing in procreation. Mill suggests public acclaim for those who prove themselves continent in their sexual relations, and public rebuke for those who sin against such barrenness of marriage. Is this not ethics, the teaching of asceticism? The production of people appears as public destitution. The meaning which production has in relation to the rich is seen revealed in the meaning which it has for the poor. Looking upwards, the manifestation is always refined, veiled, ambiguous, outward appearance. Downwards, it is rough, straightforward, frank, the real thing. The worker's crude need is a far greater source of gain than the refined need of the rich. The cellar dwellings in London bring more to those who let them than do the palaces. That is to say, with reference to the landlord they constitute greater wealth, and thus, to speak the language of political economy, greater social wealth. Industry speculates on the refinement of needs. It speculates, however, just as much on their crudeness, but on their artificially produced crudeness, whose true enjoyment, therefore, is self-stupefaction. This illusory satisfaction of need, this civilization contained within the crude barbarism of need. The English gin shops are therefore the symbolical representations of private property. Their luxury reveals the true relation of industrial luxury and wealth to men. They are therefore rightly the only Sunday pleasures of the people which the English police treats at least mildly.
This was a dramatization of a part of an early manuscript of Karl Marx's entitled Human Requirements and Division of Labor Under the Rule of Private Property, written circa 1844. This text is meant to align with the Marx-Engels Reader pages 93 through 98 but is sourced from Marxists.org. If you found this work useful, please perform any of the YouTube magic you are comfortable with which might amplify this channel's reach so that we might help others similarly. It is an uncommon trait to spend one's time studying, and I sincerely thank you for your praxis.